Welcome to the Captioned Life, a podcast about the impact of comics and pop culture on life and society. I'm your host, Kevin Stoliker.
I'm James. I'm one of your other hosts.
And I'm Sean. I'm another host.
So, some of the other questions that I had written down for us to talk about. Do you have an inkling of what the MCU means to you personally, or a favorite moment in the series that you want to share?
You know, MCU, I think by and large, it just like opens up really interesting role models that we haven't seen before, just in terms of like inspiring people to like do something that like you don't have to be a superhero to like do these things, right? Like, so even though we focus on these superheroes, I think, you know, you kind of been able to see how people can actually be their own kind of hero in these movies. And so like, for example, when you saw like the trailer, I think for can't remember if it's for Captain Marvel or what, but you kind of see like, you know, some heroes are like born, and, you know, it kind of points to, you know, Thor. Some heroes are like made, and points to Captain America. And, you know, I think what was really interesting is that you kind of see how people become heroes in their own different ways. And so like for Tony Stark, the thing I really liked about Iron Man, and growing up, I knew of Iron Man, but never read the comics Iron Man. And so when that came out, I was like, you know, I want to watch it because it's a Marvel superhero movie. But I think what was really neat about that is that it showed like he was actually just a normal guy, but he has, you know, $1 billion and is like a genius, right? So normal with those like caveats on there, right? But like he didn't have like superpowers like embedded in him like as a person or anything like that. But he took what he was or what he was able to do and like went from being this playboy, selfish guy who was just interested in making money and didn't really like, you know, gain new powers or gain anything other than just a different viewpoint. And was just able to like show like how he can actually take what he's given and what he has and use it for good, basically. And I think we see that in a lot of places in the MCU. Like, so like in Avengers, the scene that I really love in that movie is that part where Loki is telling everybody to kneel down to him. And then you have that like 70-year-old guy who was like standing up and said, "We'll never kneel to anybody like you." And like, and it's those moments where you see like other people who don't have these superpowers but are standing up and doing the right thing and things like that, I think is very inspirational, that we don't really get to see that in a lot of superhero movies. I think Marvel just does a really good job of integrating that into a lot of their movies that they do, you know? And so I think for me, this MCU just kind of made being heroes like really accessible because they have a lot of different angles and a lot of ways for you to connect and all that. But I think it's very inspirational because now you have kids who are more interested in engineering now because they're thinking like Tony Stark was an engineer, or, you know, kids who are more interested in, you know, just kind of learning more about the military because of Captain America. And then women and girls who are going to be more interested in STEM because of Shuri and Black Panther, right? And so I think that's what's going to be really great about the MCU is that we're going to see all these stories, and it's going to be very inspirational to a lot of people and not just the typical, you know, nerd fan of comic books.
When thinking about what you asked there about kind of our favorite moments in the MCU, you know, there's just so many of those. But as we kind of talked about, you know, like Iron Man 3, Age of Ultron there a little bit, you saw, you know, Tony Stark dealing with the PTSD from New York. You know, that was kind of a powerful moment. But then they kind of took that and elevated it in Endgame with Thor Bowski.
Okay.
You know, or Fat Thor, or, you know, depressed Thor, whichever word you want to use that. He experiences just this terrible 5-year depression after, you know, he had the chance to kill Thanos if he just went for the head. So, you know, he had that kind of universal guilt to see, you know, like half of his friends die and half of the universe die.
Well, even before that, half of his people on the ship.
Exactly.
As Guardians, yeah. So he's got survivor's remorse.
Exactly. So you just kind of see that, you know, depression build and build and build. And then he gets a chance to talk to his father, you know, when they go back to get the stone from Asgard. And then, you know, he finds out he's still worthy too. You know, that was just a very powerful part of it, of that movie, and in the MCU as well. I think a lot of people will see that suffer from depression, anxiety, things like that, and they're like, maybe I'm not worthless. Like maybe there's something in there still that still makes me who I am. And as a person who kind of goes through all this, it's just kind of nice to see that on screen and people kind of taking notice of that. So I think that's just going to help a lot of people too.
I think you're right, James. It's just, I never thought about the whole idea about Thor going through survivor's remorse and that depression part of things. He kind of knew it, but I didn't think about, like, until he just said it now, how that's really going to reach out to a lot of people and make them, feel like, they're not the only ones in the world kind of going through this, and that, it's okay.
One of the things that I think too, and I think it's a big part of why the three of us are doing this podcast, is because I think one of the underlying themes of the story too is the fundamental importance of friendship. I mean, these people all started in their individual movies, but they always had some sort of support system. For Cap, it was Bucky and Peggy. For the, I mean, look, you don't have to look any further than the Ant-Man and the Wasp. Those two movies. Those are really, really great ensemble films because of the people that Scott Lang has around him to support him. And I think that that's important for these heroes, like that they have this, like, these are other people who are like me. And at the end of the, we may be out fighting to save the world, or rescuing hostages, or this, that, and the other, but at the end of the day, I have somebody that I can talk to about these things, and that's important. And I think it's the same for anybody, to find your tribe and find somebody that has a similar interest, or somebody that that cares enough to listen. My wife and I were watching the series finale of The Big Bang Theory last night because we'd been on vacation. We hadn't watched it yet, and really, like, that's the series finale. And the show entirety was about the fundamental importance of friendship, and no matter how different we are, that we have something that links us, that brings us together, and that's important. The other thing, my favorite moment from any of the MCU films is from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And it's the relationship that Peter Quill has with Yondu.
Yes.
I am a stepkid. The man that is that I call dad has been. I'm 36. He's been my dad since I was in the third grade. He's was born in Mexico, came to the United States in the 60s, and so we also look very, very different. Like Yondu and Peter Quill. But when he says, he might have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy, I can barely say it out loud now without tearing it up. And kind of the same thing happened to me when Tony got to go back in time and talk to his dad in Endgame. Like those are human moments that stick out in a very fantasy world, a very science fiction backdrop, that stick with me.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, to tag along on that, my son's actually adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And, same thing that you're talking about is when Yondu said that to Quill, like it's just one of those things where it's like, it's, especially now as an adoptive father, it's good to see that what the relationship actually means between parents and children is not, it's not necessarily biological. It can be biological, but it's just like what you said with Yondu. It's, he may have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy. And that's the same thing that's true for me. It's like, my son's adopted. It's like, I've never really thought about him as being adopted. I always thought of him as being my kid, and I think that's one of the stories that we don't get to hear often as in the media, that maybe we're starting to see that now a little bit, but it's just how relationships and families isn't very what's the word I'm looking for in
It's
terms
not
of like
it's not nuclear anymore. It's not the way
right.
that
Yes.
it was in the America of yesteryear.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so it's very different, and it comes in all shapes and sizes. And that I think as long as they keep showing those different kinds of relationships and things, even in Captain Marvel, like the one thing I really liked about, I mean, there's a lot of things I loved about the movie Captain Marvel, but the one thing I loved about it is that they don't really go into Monica's like who her father was,
Mhm.
and I love that because it's a kid growing up with a single parent shouldn't have to feel like they have to fill in that gap of who my other missing parent is, and they never address that. And I hope they don't, because I think that's really cool for them to like say like this is not abnormal, like these are realities for some people. Now in my mind I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if her father was like Rhodey, because
Mhm.
of that. But I loved in the movie like how they just don't even mention about that, and I'm like, that's great because it's helping normalizing that stuff. And I think that's what we need to see with these movies, is normalizing those things that we don't talk about on a regular basis.
Yeah, just because you're not the like stereotypical family, or you're the stereotypical child, like just like Thor being depressed, you still have value, you still have
Right.
a story worth telling. So
Right. Yeah.
all right. Before we go, I wanted to just bring up a point about one of the things we've talked about before, and it has this. I want to tie this to Avengers Endgame's domestic and foreign growth. So I just looked this up at the beginning of when we started recording. So it's been out now for 6 or 7 weeks, and it has grossed domestically 826. Let's say $827 million, because the next number is a 9, so we'll round up. And then its foreign gross is $1.9 million. So worldwide, it's grossed 30% of its total here in the United States and Canada, and then foreign the other 70%, for a grand total of $2.7 billion. One of the things that I think that we're going to see with the next phase, and with more and more stories that come out of the comic book world, is how important foreign markets are for the sustainability of these films. I mean, this movie cost $350 million to produce, and granted, it made it back in its first weekend, but like these movies aren't just made for guys like you and I anymore. Like there are far more Avengers fans outside of the United States than there are in the United States, and I think that um, as an audience, we have to get on board to where the story is going, because it's more about knowing who your audience is, and the stories that the MCU is going to tell are going to be tailored for a more diverse market, and they have to be if they want to continue to make money the way that they are making. And I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on that.
I've just looked up an article that came out a couple days ago from Forbes. It's Avengers Endgame just ended its 6th week of domestic release with just under $820 billion, as you said. But the thing that I'm interested in is to see how much it made in China just on that first weekend, because I'm trying to pull that up. But
Okay, so by country, you can look this up on boxofficemojo.com. By country, Avengers Endgame has grossed $614 million in China, and that number is only as good as 526.19.
Wow.
oh wow, so I mean it's done even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So when does Avengers pass Avatar, or has it yet?
It's getting very, very close. It's probably going to come down to the wire. And, early last year, Disney did a thing where over the summer they re-released films in like double features for like drive-ins and whatnot. They released what's the A Wrinkle in Time.
Right.
as the back end of a double feature behind a movie that came out over the summer to help push it over $100 million. And then they did the exact same thing with Ant-Man and the Wasp. They re-released Black Panther as the back end of that double feature so that they could get it over $700 million domestically, because those were big milestones for those particular movies. I could definitely see them doing that here in the next couple of weeks. Like they'll get a bit of a boost after Spider-Man Endgame, but I think that's a little bit trickier because it's two different companies. Also, in Endgame is 3 hours long, so
Yeah, it's true.
anybody that's watching that as the back end of a double feature is in for a long night.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would, but I'm crazy, so that's okay. But there's other people like me who would go. But just think about this. Avengers Endgame has grossed $2.7 billion in about 6 weeks. Only $820 million in North America. So the rest of it came from China, India, Japan, these other foreign markets.
China by far has the biggest share of that. I'm looking.
Yeah, I mean,
South Korea is 104 million, and the United Kingdom has 113 million. So, like, we could be generous and round up that for the English-speaking world, it's still only about a third of the grosses are from the English-speaking world, between Australia, the United States, half of Canada, and the United Kingdom. And if listen, in the United Kingdom, they probably have to watch it with the captions on, just the way we have to watch those movies here to be able to understand what they're saying. But like, it's had a huge impact worldwide for a lot of different cultures, because these characters are characters that have been established for decades, and it's characters that people care about. But like, I really do firmly believe that you're only going to be able to tell so many stories with the stereotypical white male lead before it runs out of steam. Like, look at how poorly DC has handled their cinematic universe, and their biggest ace in the hole is Wonder Woman, because like she's the one that was established as a box office draw, and B, was a good movie to watch.
I mean, it's going to piss a lot of people off here in the U.S. when Marvel starts doing more diverse characters, because I really think that Captain Marvel's just kind of the tip of that iceberg. I think that's going to lead to a Kamala Khan Miss Marvel eventually.
Mm-hmm. I read earlier this week that they've already talked to Mindy Kaling about helping to develop that for either film or the Disney streaming service.
I mean, that's going to be fantastic, and I really hope it gets to movie. I really do, because A, it's going to be a really good movie. B, it's going to be a necessary movie because people in the United States, still have fear. There's still enough people in the United States that fear people that don't look like them or don't talk like them or have funny names in their mind. And this movie needs to be made. We need to start seeing these more diverse characters out there, and it's not to push the envelope or anything like that, but it's just so necessary.
Not diversity for diversity's sake.
Exactly.
Diversity because these are stories that need to be told. I agree with you. I think The other thing that will hit really, really close to home for a lot of people is, and I hope that they take the gloves off and they go at it full force. and in the Captain America or the Falcon and Bucky series, but I hope that they address like the racial connotations of having a black Captain America, and how 50, 60 years ago, like that would have been very, very ill received. Like people like it's 2000 when did that comic debut? Like in 2015. In 2015, there were still people. It's 2019, and people think that James Bond can't be black. like,
Well, people was in an uproar because Hermione in the play that they did was black, and J.K. Rowling's like, I've never even specified like what her race was, you know,
right.
like, and it comes back to like, you know,
Yeah.
why does that even matter? Yeah, it's.
Well, and I hope that they put something in there that gives the fanboy like a moment to pause about how they react to things like that. Like, ooh, am I part of the solution or part of the problem? Because if you're reacting negatively to it, you're probably part of the problem.
Right.
I mean, I know of people like, I live in Texas, y'all. I mean, it's not. It's racism is still a thing. I shouldn't be surprised at it at all, but I am. But the people that I know that didn't like Black Panther didn't like Black Panther because he was black. I mean, it's not.
Right.
It's not like the story wasn't good. It wasn't a good movie. It was like there's a little sprinkle of racism in there. Like it's just that's not my cup of tea.
I unfortunately know people that refuse to see Black Panther because he was black.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, I know a few too many people like that. I'm like, come on, man. Like, come on. It's time to get over this. You know, the South isn't going to rise again. It's time to get over it. Like, let's move past this. Go to therapy. You know, there's people out there who can help you.
Well, the problem is I was just talking about this, about like finding your tribe. The problem is that there are still grosses of people with similar mindsets, and they have a tendency to flock to one another. But you know, when that comic book first came out, Joe Quesada went on Stephen Colbert to announce it, and showed the cover art and announced that Sam was going to be taken over as Captain America. I was super excited. And my son was like just starting to like read then, and he was really, really into it. And because people would refer to him as Black Captain America, my son began saying Black Captain America, and I was like, no. In this house,
Right.
He's just Captain America.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's where like everybody needs to be, like what we all need to be striving for. Is we got to get to the point where the label is not as important. Or isn't important at all. It's in Band of Brothers where they say, we salute the officer, not the man.
Right.
And I think that's important. I tell my kids when I taught U.S. history forever, that the name of the president was far less important than the role that he played, and so it doesn't matter who is the president; it's always Mr. President or President Barack Obama, President Donald Trump. That the title is more important than the person standing at the podium. And so I think that's something that no matter what they decide to do with the story, is that it's just Captain America, and I hope and pray that they embrace that like full force. But hey, if you're interested, you can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Captioned Life. You can subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform, or leave us a message on Anchor or any of those services. We would love to get your feedback and hear what you think about this conversation. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you'll come back for another episode soon. So I'm Kevin Stoliker.
I'm James.
And I'm Sean.
And this is The Caption Life. We'll talk to you later.
Peace out.
See ya.